the blood trail carved through virgin snow like a confession written in scarlet. Grace Mitchell squinted through the howling Texas blizzard, her headlights catching something that shouldn't exist movement where death should reign. 19 below zero. Historic storm. Everything that could die, would die. Except her. The German Shepherd lay collapsed in a drift, her swollen belly heaving with labored breaths, ice crystals forming on her muzzle with each exhale. But it wasn't the pregnant dog fighting death that made Grace's hands tremble as she knelt. It was what Aurora clutched against her chest with desperate paws, a faded pink backpack. Small enough for a child, embroidered with butterflies and a name that made Grace's heart skip, Emily. Grace reached for the bag. Aurora's eyes snapped open, and from her throat came a growl that spoke of promises kept in darkness, of guardianship that transcended death itself. Why would a dying dog protect a child's bag over her own life? Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Grace Mitchell had learned the grief carved spaces in people that never quite filled back in. 5 years ago, a drunk driver had taken her 8-year-old daughter, Lily, leaving Grace with a veterinary practice that felt more like penance than purpose. At 35, she lived alone above her clinic on the outskirts of Austin, where the town thinned into ranch land and people minded their own business. The February storm of 2021 had transformed this familiar landscape into something alien. Power lines down, roads impassable, Texas breaking under the weight of ice it was never meant to bear. Aurora was 5 years old. According to the rabies tag Grace would later find, a German Shepherd who should have been in her prime, now reduced to bones and scars beneath matted fur. 7 deep gashes marked her back, deliberate, methodical. The kind of wounds that spoke of human cruelty rather than accident. Her pregnancy was advanced, maybe days from delivery, and Grace wondered what kind of monster would abandon a pregnant dog in the worst storm in Texas history. 3 miles from Grace's clinic, Frank Donovan's house stood like a monument to decay. Once a skilled construction worker who'd built half the homes in town, Frank hadn't worked since February 14, 2018, the day his 7-year-old daughter Emily vanished into another winter storm. The police had found her pink backpack near the creek, but never her body. The search lasted 72 hours before they called it off. Emily would be 10 now, if miracles existed. Instead, Frank existed in a haze of bourbon and blame. His only companion, the dog he'd once bought for Emily, the dog who'd failed to bring his baby home. Margaret Henderson, known as Maggie to everyone in town, had watched it all unfold from her kitchen window. At 72, she'd outlived a husband, 2 sons, and more secrets than any person should carry. She knew things about that night 3 years ago, things about footprints in the snow, about travelers passing through, about a child's cry she'd heard carried on the wind. But Maggie understood that some truths needed ripening, like fruit on a vine, too early, and they'd poison everyone who tasted them. The storm outside Grace's clinic howled with unusual fury, as if nature itself was preparing to unveil what had been buried in 3 years of silence and snow. Grace had been driving back from an emergency call. Old Murphy's horse had colic, though it hadn't survived the night when her headlights caught the blood. Fresh red against white. Impossible to miss even through the sideways falling snow. She'd pulled over against her better judgment. The wind hit her face like shattered glass when she opened the door, and she had to shield her eyes to follow the trail. Aurora lay there like a question mark curled against death, her body wrapped around that pink backpack as if it contained the world's last warmth. Grace's veterinary training kicked in immediately. The dog's breathing was shallow, rapid, maybe 30 respirations per minute. Hypothermia. Shock. Advanced pregnancy. The math was simple and cruel. Aurora had maybe an hour, less if Grace didn't move fast. "Hey, girl," Grace whispered, reaching out slowly. Aurora's eyes opened amber brown, clouded with pain but sharp with purpose. When Grace's hand moved toward the bag, Aurora bared her teeth, a growl rumbling from somewhere deeper than her throat. It was the sound of a promise being kept. Grace retreated, tried another approach. She wrapped her coat around Aurora's body, avoiding the bag entirely. The dog allowed this, even seemed grateful. but her paws never loosened their grip on those faded straps. Getting Aurora into the truck took 20 minutes Grace didn't have. The dog weighed maybe 60 pounds, should have been 80, and every movement brought a whimper that Grace felt in her bones. Back at the clinic, Grace worked with practiced efficiency: IV fluids, warming blankets, antibiotics. The ultrasound showed at least 5 puppies, maybe more. Hearts still beating, but weak. Aurora needed an emergency C-section, but she wouldn't release the bag even as the sedatives took hold. Grace had seen dogs cling to toys before, but this was different. This was devotion that transcended consciousness. As Grace shaved Aurora's belly for surgery, she cataloged the damage. Those 7 scars on her back were methodical, made by a belt, probably, or a stick. Old injuries beneath broken ribs that had healed wrong, a shoulder that had been dislocated. This dog had been someone's punching bag for years. Yet when Grace's assistant, Tommy, tried to move the backpack just 6 inches to make room for the surgical equipment, Aurora's eyes snapped open despite the sedation, her jaw clamping down on Tommy's wrist, not hard enough to break skin, but firm enough to communicate, "The bag stays." They performed the surgery with the backpack pressed against Aurora's side. It was past midnight when Aurora finally slept deeply enough for Grace to examine the bag properly. The clinic was quiet except for the storm's fury outside and the soft beeping of monitors. Grace unzipped it carefully, feeling like a trespasser in someone else's tragedy. Inside was a child's universe, compressed and preserved. A cloth doll, handmade, with yellow yarn hair and a dress made from what looked like curtain fabric. One button eye was missing. There was a photograph, water-damaged and torn, showing partial face as a child's smile, the edge of a dog's muzzle, a small knitted scarf, lavender and white, with dropped stitches that spoke of a beginner's enthusiasm, and at the bottom, folded into a square no bigger than a playing card, a piece of notebook paper. Grace unfolded it under the surgical light. A child's handwriting, careful and round. "Aurora, keep me safe until I come back. You promised you would never leave me. I love you more than all the stars. Emily." Grace sat back, the paper trembling in her hands. Emily Donovan. The girl who'd vanished 3 years ago. The girl whose father lived 3 miles away in a house that reeked of bourbon and regret. This wasn't just a dog with a bag, this was a guardian carrying out a mission that had lasted longer than anyone could have imagined. Aurora whimpered in her sleep, her paws twitching, reaching for something that wasn't there. "Emily," she seemed to whisper, though dogs couldn't speak. Emily. Over and over, a name that had become a prayer, a promise, a penance. Grace pulled up a chair beside Aurora's recovery cage, the pink backpack placed where the dog could see it when she woke. Outside, the storm intensified, power lines groaning under the weight of ice. The clinic's generator hummed to life as the main power failed. In the darkness punctuated only by emergency lighting and monitor glow, Grace understood she'd stumbled into something that transcended a simple rescue. This was about promises that survived abandonment, about loyalty that endured abuse, about love that even death couldn't diminish. The real question wasn't why Aurora protected the bag. It was what had happened to the little girl who'd asked her to. 7 days had passed since Grace pulled Aurora from the snow, and the storm had only grown worse. Texas was breaking under the weight of ice it was never built to handle. Power had been out for 3 days straight, and Grace's generator sputtered on its last reserves of fuel. She'd moved her surgical recovery area to the warmest room. Clustering Aurora with 2 other animals, she was boarding refugees from the storm. Aurora had healed remarkably fast, though she still moved with the careful deliberation of someone who'd learned that sudden movements brought pain. She'd begun arranging blankets in a specific pattern, always with the pink backpack at the center. Like some ancient ritual of motherhood she couldn't quite remember but couldn't forget. Grace had watched German shepherds prepare for birth before, but this was different. This was architectural, deliberate, almost desperate. The pounding on the clinic door came at 2 in the afternoon, though the dark sky made it feel like midnight. Grace knew who it was before she opened it. She could smell the bourbon through the door, could hear the slurred cursing that preceded Frank Donovan wherever he went these days. "Where's my goddamn dog?" Frank stood in the doorway, swaying slightly, his construction worker's frame still imposing despite 3 years of self-destruction. Ice crystals clung to his beard, and his eyes were bloodshot maps of regret. "I know you have her. Tommy told me at the liquor store." "Mr. Donovan, you need to leave." Grace kept her voice steady, professional, though her hand moved to her phone. "Aurora is recovering from major surgery. She was nearly dead when I found her." "Aurora?" Frank laughed, but it came out like breaking glass. "That what you're calling her? Her name's Dog. Has been for 3 years. Just Dog." He pushed past Grace, stumbling into the clinic. The smell of him bourbon, cigarettes, unwashed clothes filled the small space. From the recovery room came a sound Grace had never heard Aurora make, a keen of pure terror that raised every hair on her arms. Frank heard it too, and something flickered across his face. Satisfaction, guilt, both. "She knows Daddy's here?" Frank slurred, moving toward the sound. Grace stepped in front of him. "She's terrified of you. What did you do to her?" "What did I do?" Frank's face twisted. "What did she do? That's the question. 3 years ago. My little girl. My Emily." His voice cracked on the name. "Aurora was supposed to protect her. That's why we got her. To keep Emily safe. And where was she when my baby needed her? Where was she?" Aurora's keening grew louder, and Grace could hear her thrashing in her cage, probably tearing her stitches. "Mr. Donovan, you need to leave. Now. Or I'm calling the sheriff." "The sheriff?" Frank laughed again. "You think anybody's coming in this storm? You think anybody gives a damn about a drunk and his dog?" He took another step forward, and Grace saw his fists clench. "That dog let my daughter die. 7 years old. 7. He held up his hands, counting on his fingers with drunk precision. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 years I had her. 7 years she was my whole world. And that dog." The door burst open again, bringing a swirl of snow and Margaret Henderson, all 4 feet 11 inches of her, wrapped in a coat that had probably been her husband's. At 72, Maggie moved with the purposeful energy of someone who'd outlived too much to be afraid of anything. "Franklin Donovan," she said, and somehow his full name in her mouth sounded like a leash snapping tight. "You're done here." Frank turned, swaying. "Maggie, what are you—" She walked right up to him, had to crane her neck to look him in the eye, and whispered something Grace couldn't hear. The color drained from Frank's face. He looked like he'd been slapped by God himself. "You don't know," he said weakly. "You weren't there." "I know more than you think," Maggie replied. "And if you don't leave right now, if you don't get yourself home and sober up, I'll tell everyone what I know, including what really happened that night, including why the search team gave up on the creek bed, including what you did when Aurora tried to show them." Frank stumbled backward, his eyes wide with something beyond drunk real, sobering fear. "You can't know that. Can I?" Maggie's voice was steel wrapped in grandmotherly sweetness. "Get out, Frank. Some truths need their time. And yours isn't now." He left without another word, crashing through the door into the storm. Grace could hear his truck engine struggle to turn over, then catch, then fade into the white noise of wind. "What did you tell him?" Grace asked. "What really happened that night?" Maggie looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. "Some stories ain't mine to tell, dear. Not yet. That dog in there, she's got her reasons for holding on to that bag. Frank's got his reasons for drinking. And somewhere out there, there's a truth waiting to be found. But not today." She patted Grace's arm. You just keep that dog safe. Keep them puppies safe. The rest will come when it's meant to." She left as suddenly as she'd arrived, leaving Grace with more questions than answers. In the recovery room, Aurora had calmed, but the incident had changed something. She'd pulled the pink backpack underneath her body, was lying on it now like a hen on an egg. She wouldn't eat unless Grace placed the food where she could see the bag while eating. At night, she whimpered and pawed at it, arranging and rearranging it in her nest. Grace did the math. Aurora had been pregnant for probably 60 days. German Shepherd gestation was 63. 3 more days. Maybe less given the stress. She watched Aurora nose the backpack into position for the 100th time, her movements becoming more frantic as her body prepared for birth. "What are you trying to tell me?" Grace whispered, sitting beside the cage. Aurora looked at her with those amber eyes, then deliberately pushed the bag toward the cage door, not surrendering it, but showing it, like evidence in a case only she understood. Grace noticed something she'd missed before. The backpack wasn't just faded, it had been repaired, multiple times. Clumsy stitches held tears together. A strap had been retied where it had broken. This bag had been maintained, treasured, protected through 3 years of hell. Aurora had kept her promise. Whatever that promise truly meant. Whatever had really happened the night Emily disappeared. Aurora had never let go. Outside, the storm grew worse. The radio reported 12 dead across Texas. Thousands without power. Roads that wouldn't be clear for weeks. And in a small veterinary clinic, a dog prepared to give birth while clutching the last remnant of a child who'd asked her to keep her safe. Grace couldn't shake Maggie's words. Some truths need their time. Time for what? Time for whom? And what truth could be so terrible that even now, 3 years later, it still had the power to drain the color from Frank Donovan's face? The pink backpack seemed to pulse with secrets in the dim emergency lighting, and Aurora curled tighter around it, as if she could somehow protect the past from the present, promise from reality, love from loss. Grace couldn't let it go. After Maggie's cryptic visit and Frank's drunken intrusion, she needed to understand what had happened to Emily Donovan. The storm had trapped everyone indoors anyway, roads closed, internet down, nothing but time and questions. She'd found an old laptop in her office with downloaded newspaper archives from the county library's digitization project, something she'd helped fund but never used. The Austin Chronicle. February 15, 2018. Local girl, 7, presumed dead in ice storm. The headline was stark, matter of fact, the way newspapers report tragedies that have become statistics. Emily Marie Donovan, 2nd grader at Valley Elementary, had gone missing during the unexpected ice storm that hit central Texas on February 14th. Last seen playing with family dog in backyard. Search called off after 72 hours due to dangerous conditions. No body recovered. Grace read deeper. The search had involved 40 volunteers, 2 helicopters, heat-sensing equipment. They'd focused on Peterson Creek, where Emily's backpack had been found snagged on a branch. The water had been moving fast with snow melt, ice cold, impossible for a child to survive. Frank Donovan was quoted, "She's gone. My baby's gone. The dog came back without her. That's all I need to know." But there was something odd in the sheriff's report, buried in the last paragraph. The family dog repeatedly attempted to lead searchers away from the creek, toward the northern woods. This behavior was dismissed as trauma response. Grace looked at Aurora, sleeping fitfully in her cage, paws still wrapped around the backpack. "You tried to tell them, didn't you? You knew she wasn't in the creek." The next few hours became an investigation. Grace bundled up and made her way through the storm to the library, abandoned but unlocked, the way small towns leave things. The physical newspaper archives were still there, yellowing and dusty. She found more details the digital version had trimmed. Photos of the search. Frank, 3 years younger, clean-shaven, desperate but sober. Aurora younger, healthier, straining against her leash, trying to pull rescuers in a specific direction. There was a photo that made Grace's hands shake. Emily Donovan. School portrait. Gap-toothed smile. Wearing a lavender sweater that matched the scarf in the backpack. But it was the smaller photo beside it that stopped Grace's heart. Emily and Aurora at Christmas, just 2 months before the disappearance. The little girl's arms wrapped around the dog's neck, her face buried in Aurora's fur. The caption, Emily and her guardian angel Aurora, Christmas 2017. Grace drove to the town's only diner, closed but with Patricia Wilson, the owner, living upstairs. Patricia had run the place for 30 years, knew everyone's business. She answered the door wrapped in 3 blankets, her breath visible in the cold. Grace, what are you doing out in this? I need to know about Frank Donovan, before Emily disappeared. Patricia's face changed, softened with the particular sadness reserved for tragedies that broke good people. Oh, honey, why are you digging into that pain? I have Aurora. There's something not right about all this. Patricia made instant coffee on her camping stove, the power having been out for days. Frank was different before, you wouldn't recognize him. Best father you ever saw. Him and Emily, they were a team after her mother passed cancer. When Emily was 3, Frank didn't date, didn't drink, nothing. Just work and Emily. He built her a playhouse that was nicer than most real houses. Taught her to use tools, to build things. They got Aurora when Emily turned 4. For protection, he said, but really because Emily begged for a dog for 2 years straight. What happened after? What happens to any parent who loses a child? He broke. But Frank broke mean. Started drinking the day they called off the search. Lost his job within a month. Started blaming Aurora. Said she was supposed to protect Emily. That's why they got a German Shepherd. The abuse started small, yelling, throwing things. Then it got worse. Nobody stopped him. Patricia looked away. We tried. Sheriff went out there a couple times. But Frank's smart even drunk. Never left marks where they'd show it first. And that dog. She never fought back. Never bit him. Never ran away. Like she was doing penance for something. Those scars on her back. 7 of them. 1 for each year of Emily's life. He did it on Emily's birthday each year. Like some sick ritual. Said it was to remind Aurora what she took from him. Patricia wiped her eyes. We all knew. The whole town knew. And we did nothing because what do? Take the dog. Where would she go? And Frank? Somewhere in that drunk. Mean shell is the man who used to give Emily piggyback rides down Main Street. Grace found the Hendersons next. Bob and Maggie Henderson. Though Bob barely spoke anymore after his stroke, Maggie welcomed her in, their house warmed by a wood-burning stove. I figured you'd come asking, Maggie said, settling into her recliner. You want to know what I know about that night? You were there. I was here. Same as always. But I see things from this window. That night, the storm came fast. Frank had been drinking, not falling down drunk like now, but enough. He sent Emily out to play with Aurora. Said they'd be fine for a few minutes. Kids and dogs love snow, right? But he fell asleep on the couch. Maggie paused, staring at something beyond the window, beyond the present storm. I heard Aurora barking. Not normal barking, the kind that means something's wrong. Went on for maybe 20 minutes. Then it stopped. About an hour later, I see Aurora at Frank's door, pawing, barking again. Frank finally comes out, realizes Emily's not with her. That's when the panic started. But you said there was more. Something about the search area. Maggie's eyes sharpened. Aurora kept trying to lead them north, toward the woods, but Frank found Emily's backpack by the creek and fixated on that. Wouldn't consider anywhere else. When Aurora tried to pull the searchers north on day 2, Frank hit her, hard, with a stick, in front of everyone, said she was confused, traumatized. The searchers followed Frank's lead. He was the father, after all. They searched the creek for 3 days, never went north. Why didn't you say something? I did. Sheriff told me dogs get confused in trauma. Frank told everyone Aurora had failed, had let Emily wander to the creek. Who listens to an old woman over a grieving father? Grace was about to leave when Maggie grabbed her arm. There's one more thing. The morning after, before the search really started, I saw tracks in the snow. Adult boots. Not from town. Leading north. They were covered by afternoon snowfall, but I saw them. Someone else was out there. Travelers, maybe. We get them sometimes. People passing through, especially ones who don't want to be found. They camp in the northern woods. But in that storm, Maggie shrugged. I told the sheriff. He said it was probably hunters from before the storm. But hunters don't walk in single file, and they don't walk that purposeful. Back at the clinic, Grace found something she'd overlooked, an old SD card in the bottom of the backpack, wrapped in plastic. Her laptop still had battery. And when she inserted the card, 43 video files appeared, all dated between 2016 and February 2018. The first video was Aurora as a puppy, 8 weeks old, tumbling over Emily's lap. Emily couldn't have been more than 5, missing her front teeth, giggling as Aurora licked her face. "This is my guardian angel," Emily announced to the camera. "Daddy says she'll always protect me." Grace watched them all. A chronicle of unconditional love. Aurora growing from clumsy puppy to elegant adolescent. Emily teaching her tricks, reading to her, using her as a pillow during movie nights. Frank's voice occasionally from behind the camera, warm, loving, whole. One video from January 2018 made Grace pause. Emily, now 7, was brushing Aurora's fur. "You know what, Aurora? If something ever happens, if I get lost or scared, you have to find me, okay? Promise. Even if everyone else gives up, you won't give up, right?" Aurora had placed her paw on Emily's hand, as if sealing the deal. Emily hugged her tight. "I love you more than all the stars." The last video was February 13th, 2018. The day before. Emily was showing Aurora how to carry her backpack. "See, you're so strong. You could carry my whole life in there." She'd packed it with her treasures, the doll, her scarf, a drawing for Aurora. "This is important stuff, Aurora. Keep it safe." Grace was crying now, alone in her office while the storm raged outside. She understood what she was watching, the last moments of a perfect friendship before the world broke it apart. She moved to the recovery room where Aurora was awake, watching her with those amber eyes that held too much history. Grace sat on the floor beside the cage, laptop balanced on her knees. "You want to see her?" she asked softly. She turned the screen toward Aurora and played a video of Emily singing. Aurora's entire body changed. Her ears perked forward. Her tail attempted a wag despite her condition, and from her throat came a sound Grace had never heard, part whine, part cry, wholly desperate. "I know," Grace whispered. "I know you tried. I know you never gave up." She found herself talking then, words she'd never said aloud. "I lost my daughter too. Lily. She was 8, drunk driver, 3 days before Christmas 5 years ago. I understand the promise. Aurora. The way to failing to protect them. But you didn't fail. You tried to tell them where she was." Aurora pushed the backpack toward the cage door again, more insistent this time. Grace noticed something new, faint marks on the bottom of the bag, like it had been dragged across rough ground repeatedly. Like Aurora had been carrying it somewhere, over and over, trying to show someone something. "You've been trying to take this somewhere, haven't you? For 3 years you've been trying." The storm outside was getting worse. The radio, running on batteries, reported 23 dead across Texas now. The National Guard was mobilizing, but roads wouldn't be clear for a week at minimum. Grace's generator coughed, sputtered, died. The backup battery system kicked in 8 hours of power, maybe 12 if she was careful. She made a decision. Moving her cot into the recovery room, she set up camp beside Aurora's cage. If these puppies came during the storm, she'd need to be right there. No power meant no incubator, no heating pads. She'd have to keep them warm the old-fashioned way. Aurora watched her arrange the space, and for the first time since Grace had found her, she saw the dog's body relax slightly. Not trust, exactly, but recognition. This human understood promises. This human wouldn't give up. Grace pulled out the photograph from the backpack again, studying it under her flashlight. Water damage had destroyed most of it, but she could make out partial images: Emily's smile, Aurora's fur, and in the background, barely visible, what looked like trees, northern trees, the direction Aurora had tried to lead the searchers. What happened in those woods? Aurora, what did you see? Aurora's response was to curl tighter around the backpack, her body trembling with more than cold. Her puppies were coming soon. Grace could see the signs. The nesting behavior was intensifying, her breathing changing, her focus turning inward. But even as her body prepared for birth, Aurora's eyes remained fixed on that pink backpack, on the promise she'd carried for 3 years through abuse and abandonment, through 7 scars and countless beatings. She'd never let go, never given up, never stopped trying to fulfill a 7-year-old's request to keep her safe. Grace reached through the cage bars, gently touching Aurora's head. When this storm passes, when you're strong enough, we're going to those woods. We're going to find out what you've been trying to tell everyone. I promise. Aurora looked at her then. Really looked at her. And in those amber depths, Grace saw what 3 years of failure hadn't killed: hope, desperate, weary, but undimmed hope that someone would finally listen, finally understand, finally help her keep her promise to Emily. The storm howled its fury against the clinic walls, the temperature dropping further, ice building on every surface. Texas was dying under winter's assault. But in this small, warm space, life was preparing to emerge. Aurora's puppies would be born into a world of ice and darkness, but also into a world where promises still mattered, where love endured beyond reason, where a dog's loyalty could survive even the complete destruction of everything else. Grace settled in for the long watch, knowing that when the storm broke, when the puppies came, when the truth finally emerged, everything would change. Some transformations came sudden like storms, but others, the most profound ones, came from promises kept in darkness, waiting for someone to finally bring them to light. February 14th arrived with a violence that made the previous days seem like mere rehearsal. The storm had become a monster, winds hitting 70 miles per hour, ice accumulating faster than nature ever intended for Texas. Grace had been awake for 36 hours straight, monitoring Aurora, rationing the backup battery power, keeping the space warm with blankets and her own body heat. At 3:47 a.m., exactly 3 years to the hour from when Emily had disappeared, Aurora's water broke. It started wrong from the beginning. The fluid was tinged with blood, not the normal amount, but enough to make Grace's veterinary instincts scream warnings. Aurora's breathing became labored, panicked, her eyes rolling white with pain that went beyond normal labor. "Easy, girl, easy," Grace whispered, her hands already examining. What she felt made her stomach drop. The first puppy was breached, stuck, and Aurora was already hemorrhaging. The battery backup chose that moment to give its final warning beep. 3 minutes of power left. Grace grabbed her emergency flashlight, propping it between her shoulder and cheek as she worked. The shadows it cast made the room feel like a cave. Primitive, dangerous. Aurora's contractions were coming too fast, too strong. Grace had to reposition the puppy manually, her hands steady despite the crisis. Aurora screamed. There was no other word for the sound, and Grace felt the puppy shift. One more contraction and suddenly there it was, sliding into Grace's hands. A male, not breathing. "Come on. Come on," Grace rubbed the puppy vigorously, clearing his airways, breathing into his tiny nostrils. Nothing. Nothing. Then a gasp, a tiny cry. And he was breathing. In the flashlight's beam, Grace saw something that made her freeze. On his forehead, clear as daylight, was a white marking shaped exactly like a star. Aurora saw it too, despite her pain. She reached for the puppy, licking him frantically. And then, for the first time since Grace had found her, she deliberately pushed the pink backpack toward Grace with her nose, not clutching it, not protecting it, offering it. You want me to look now? Aurora's eyes met hers, and in them was something beyond pain, beyond animal. It was urgency mixed with trust, as if she knew something Grace needed to know right now. With the puppy safe against Aurora's belly, Grace took the backpack. She'd examined it before, but in the dark, working by touch more than sight. Her fingers found something she'd missed, a hidden zipper along the inner lining. Inside was a plastic bag, and inside that, oh my God! It was a medical alert bracelet, child-sized, the kind that never came off. Emily Donovan, type O negative blood, severe allergy to penicillin, and at the bottom, a tracking number for the bracelet's registration. But there was more. A folded piece of paper, different from the child's note. This one was in adult handwriting, hurried, desperate. Found her in the snow, barely alive. Can't go to hospital, have warrants. Taking her to Oklahoma, to my sister. She'll be safe. Tell no one. The dog wouldn't leave. Kept following. Had to drive fast to lose her. God forgive me. T.R. Grace's hands shook. Emily might be alive. Had been alive when taken. Oklahoma. The dog had known, had tried to follow, had kept the evidence all this time. Another contraction ripped through Aurora, bringing Grace back to the immediate crisis. The second puppy was coming, but Aurora was bleeding too much, her body temperature dropping despite the warm room. Grace worked mechanically, delivering the second puppy, a female, healthy, crying immediately. Then a third, another male. But Aurora was fading, her breathing shallow, the blood pooling beneath her. That's when the clinic door exploded open, bringing a hurricane of snow and Frank Donovan. He stood there like a specter from a nightmare, ice in his beard, bourbon on his breath, but his eyes were stone-cold sober with grief. It's her anniversary, he said, his voice broken. 3 years ago. Right now. This minute. I was waking up to Aurora barking. 3 years ago, I was realizing my baby was gone. He saw Aurora then. Saw the blood. The puppies. The struggle between life and death playing out on the clinic floor. Jesus Christ, what's happening? She's dying, Grace said bluntly, her hands working to stop the hemorrhage. She's losing too much blood. I need help or we're going to lose her and the rest of the puppies. Frank stood frozen for a moment. Then something shifted in his face. The drunk disappeared. The construction worker who'd once built things with his hands emerged. Tell me what to do. Hold this pressure here. Don't let go no matter what. Grace positioned his hands on Aurora's abdomen. Press hard, harder than you think. Aurora's eyes opened at Frank's touch, and Grace expected terror. Instead, she saw recognition. And incredibly, Aurora's tail moved slightly, not a wag, just an acknowledgement. Frank's composure cracked. I'm sorry, he whispered, tears freezing on his cheeks. God, I'm so sorry. I know you tried. I know you tried to show us where she was. I couldn't see past my pain. The fourth puppy came with a rush of blood that painted the floor crimson. Grace worked frantically, delivering the puppy while trying to stop the hemorrhage. The puppy, another female, wasn't breathing. Grace tried everything. But after 5 minutes, she had to accept the loss. Aurora seemed to know, whimpering softly. There are more, Grace said, feeling Aurora's contracting uterus. At least 3 more, but if she keeps bleeding like this, she'll make it, Frank said with sudden conviction. She's never given up on anything, not on Emily, not even on me, and God knows I gave her reason to. As if responding to his words, Aurora's eyes focused, She looked at Frank, then at Grace, then at the backpack lying open beside them, the medical bracelet visible in the flashlight beam. Her message was clear. You know now. You understand. The fifth puppy came easier, as if Aurora's body had found some reserve of strength. Then the sixth, both healthy, both crying. But the seventh. It's stuck, Grace said. And she's too weak for me to. Aurora made a sound, deep in her chest. Not pain, but determination. She bore down with a force that shouldn't have been possible. And the last puppy, the smallest, a female, slid into the world. But Aurora's effort cost her. Her heart rate plummeted. Her breathing became agonal. No, Frank said, his hand still pressing where Grace had shown him. No. You don't get to die now. Not when there's hope. That word hung in the air. Hope. Grace grabbed the medical bracelet, held it where Aurora could see it. Emily might be alive. Aurora, you did it. You kept the proof. We can find her because of you. Aurora's eyes tracked to the bracelet, then to her puppies, nursing against her belly despite the chaos. The one with the star on his forehead was strongest, already fighting his siblings for position. Aurora watched him for a long moment, then her gaze moved to Frank. What passed between them in that moment was 3 years of compressed emotion, rage, grief, guilt, forgiveness. Frank sobbed openly, his hands gentle now where they'd once dealt pain. I'll find her. I swear to God, Aurora. I'll find her, and I'll bring her home to you. Whether it was the promise or pure will. Aurora's heart rate stabilized, her breathing deepened, the bleeding, impossibly, slowed. Grace worked through the next hour in a blur of medical intervention, suturing, cleaning, monitoring. Frank never moved, never let go, his hands steady and sure. When the immediate crisis passed, when all 7 living puppies were nursing and Aurora was stable, Grace finally allowed herself to breathe. The storm still raged outside, but inside, in this small circle of light and life, something had shifted. Frank was staring at the medical bracelet, at the note with the initials T.R. Thomas Rodriguez, he said suddenly. He worked construction with me, had family in Oklahoma, had warrants for check fraud, disappeared right after Emily. His voice broke. He saved her. The son of a bitch saved her and never told anyone. We need to contact Oklahoma authorities, Grace said. With the tracking number from the bracelet, with DNA from her things. As soon as the storm breaks. Frank's voice was stronger now, purposeful. I'm going to find my daughter. Aurora was watching them both, her eyes heavy but alert. She'd done it, delivered her puppies, delivered her message, delivered hope from 3 years of darkness. The pink backpack lay beside her, no longer clutched desperately but resting peacefully, its purpose finally fulfilled. The star-marked puppy squeaked and wiggled closer to Aurora's warmth. She licked him gently, and Grace could have sworn she saw something like peace in the dog's eyes. The promise had been kept, the truth had been revealed, and somewhere in Oklahoma, a little girl who'd asked her dog to keep her safe was about to be found. The storm continued its assault on Texas, but in the veterinary clinic, surrounded by new life and impossible hope, 3 broken souls had found something they'd thought lost forever: the possibility of redemption, the power of truth, and the unbreakable nature of love that even 3 years of darkness couldn't destroy. Aurora slept then, truly slept, without whimpering Emily's name, without clutching the backpack, without the weight of an unkept promise. She slept like what she was: a mother, a survivor, a keeper of faith who'd finally delivered her message to someone who would listen. Frank stayed through the night, his hands gentle on Aurora's head, whispering apologies and promises in equal measure. Grace worked around them both, keeping the puppies warm, monitoring Aurora's recovery, and thinking about the phone calls that would be made when the storm broke, the reunion that would come, the healing that might finally begin. 7 puppies, 7 years of Emily's life, 7 scars on Aurora's back. The number seemed less like coincidence and more like completion, a circle closing, a debt paid, a promise fulfilled in the most extraordinary way imaginable. The storm had created a bubble of forced intimacy in the clinic. 3 souls trapped with truth that could no longer be avoided. Frank hadn't moved from Aurora's side in 2 hours, his hand stroking her fur with a gentleness that seemed to surprise him. The puppies nursed peacefully, unaware of the weight of history in the room. Grace was checking Aurora's vitals when Frank began to speak, his voice hollow as a cave. "You want to know what really happened that night, what kind of man I really am?" He wasn't looking at Grace but at Aurora, as if she were his confessor. "I was drunk, not falling down drunk, but enough. Enough to think it was fine to send my 7-year-old out to play in the snow at dusk. Enough to think Aurora would handle everything." He pulled a flask from his pocket, looked at it, then set it aside untouched. Emily had been begging all day. "Daddy, please, it never snows like this. Please let me play." I was tired, had been working a 12-hour shift, wanted to watch the game, have a few beers in peace, so I said yes. Told her to take Aurora, stay in the backyard. 20 minutes, I said. Aurora's eyes were open, watching him. There was no accusation in them, just endless weariness. I fell asleep on the couch. Passed out is more honest. Woke up to Aurora barking, pawing at the door. She'd probably been at it for an hour. The back door was open. Snow blowing in. Emily was gone. Frank's hands clenched and unclenched. I ran out, screaming her name. Aurora took off toward the woods, the northern woods. But then I saw Emily's backpack by the creek, caught on a branch, and I thought. He stopped, struggling. Grace waited, knowing this confession had been 3 years coming. Aurora kept trying to pull me north. She'd run a few feet, come back, grab my coat sleeve, try to drag me. But that backpack by the water. All I could see was Emily falling in, being swept away. I called 911, told them she'd gone to the creek. When the search team arrived, I told them the same thing. Made it sound certain. But Aurora knew different. Grace said softly. She knew exactly where Emily was, or where she'd been. That second day of searching, Aurora broke free from the house, ran straight to the search team, started that pulling thing again, trying to lead them north. I was hungover, exhausted, half crazy with grief. When she grabbed the search leader's jacket, trying to pull him toward the woods, Frank's voice broke completely. He covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking. I hit her, with a branch, hard as I could, in front of everyone, screamed that she was traumatized, confused that she was making things worse. The search team believed me. Why wouldn't they? I was the father. I knew my daughter's patterns. The dog was just a dog. Aurora made a small sound. And impossibly. It sounded like forgiveness. Frank looked at her, tears streaming freely now. They searched the creek for 3 days. Never went north past the tree line. Aurora tried twice more to lead them, but after what I'd done, nobody listened. They said trauma makes animals act strange. The sheriff told me to keep her contained so she wouldn't interfere with the search. His laugh was bitter as winter wind. Interfere. She was trying to save Emily. And I called it interference. Grace felt sick. The tracks Maggie saw. Thomas Rodriguez. He'd been let go from my crew a week before for failing a drug test. Had warrants out for check fraud, was camping in the northern woods to avoid arrest. He must have found Emily, realized he couldn't take her to the hospital without getting arrested. So he took her to his sister in Oklahoma instead. He saved her life, Grace said. He did what I should have done. He stayed sober enough to help her. He made the hard choice to get her somewhere safe, even knowing it meant kidnapping charges if caught. And Aurora must have seen them leave, tried to follow. That's why she came back alone, but kept trying to lead us north. She knew which direction they'd gone. Frank picked up the note that had been hidden in the backpack. The one signed T.R. Rodriguez must have written this. Left it somewhere. Maybe planning to send it later. Aurora must have found it. Added it to Emily's things. For 3 years, she's been carrying the truth I was too drunk and proud to see. Aurora's breathing suddenly changed, becoming labored again. Grace checked her quickly, and her heart sank. The hemorrhaging had restarted, worse than before. Internal bleeding. Probably from a torn vessel that had temporarily clotted. She's bleeding again, Grace said, moving into emergency mode. Internally this time. Frank's face went white. Fix her. Please. You have to fix her. I need to operate. But she's too weak. The anesthesia alone might kill her. And I don't have blood for a transfusion. The storms made it impossible to. Aurora's eyes were on her puppies. All 7 of them nursing, alive, warm. The star-marked one was right against her chest, his little paws kneading. She looked at them, then at Grace, and the message in her eyes was clear. No, Grace said. Aurora, no. But Aurora had already made her choice. She nudged each puppy gently, memorizing them. When she got to the star-marked one, she lingered, licking his head repeatedly, as if trying to transfer all her love in these few moments. Then she looked at Grace and Frank, and her eyes said what her voice couldn't take care of them. Keep them safe. Like I kept my promise. We have to try. Frank said desperately. There has to be something. Grace was already working. Her hands moving with practiced efficiency even as her heart broke. She'd seen this before, mothers choosing their offspring over themselves. The oldest sacrifice in nature's book. But this felt different. This felt like Aurora was completing something, finishing a job that had started 3 years ago in the snow. The next 30 minutes were the longest of Grace's career. Without proper equipment, without blood, without power, she did battlefield medicine on a clinic floor. Frank held Aurora's head, whispering to her apologies, promises, memories of Emily that he hadn't spoken aloud in 3 years. Remember when Emily dressed you up for Halloween? You were so patient, letting her put that tutu on you, pink and purple, with sparkles. You looked ridiculous and you knew it, but you wore it for 2 hours because she was so happy. That's when I knew you'd always protect her. That's when I knew you were special. Aurora's tail moved slightly, acknowledging the memory. And the time she had the flu. You wouldn't leave her bed for 3 days. I had to bring your food up. You'd only eat if Emily was awake to see you, like you thought she needed to know you were okay. Grace worked through the memories, suturing internal damage that might already be too extensive. Aurora's blood pressure kept dropping, her heart rate becoming erratic. But she held on, watching Frank's face as he talked. I'm going to find her, Aurora. I'm going to bring Emily home. And I'm going to tell her what you did. How you never gave up. Never stopped trying. Even when I gave you every reason to. I'm going to tell her you kept your promise. Aurora's eyes moved to the puppies one more time. The star-marked one had climbed over his siblings and was pressed against Aurora's neck. As if he knew. Aurora gave him one last lick. Then looked at Frank. In her eyes was 3 years of accumulated pain, but also, finally, peace. She's forgiving you, Grace said quietly. After everything, she's forgiving you. But Frank broke down completely, his head on Aurora's shoulder, sobbing like the broken man he'd become. I don't deserve it. I don't deserve any of it. Aurora's paw moved, just barely, touching Frank's hand. The gesture was so deliberate, so human, that Grace had to turn away to hide her own tears. This dog, who had every reason to hate, was choosing love in what might be her last moments. The storm outside seemed to pause, as if nature itself recognized the gravity of the moment. In the silence, Grace could hear each puppy's tiny breath, Frank's broken sobs, and Aurora's increasingly labored breathing. The flashlight beam created a circle of light around them, holding back the darkness that pressed against the windows. "She's stabilizing," Grace said, hardly believing her own words. "I don't know how, but she's stabilizing." Aurora's eyes were closing, not in death but in exhausted sleep. Her body had given everything, endured everything, and somehow, impossibly, it was choosing to continue. Frank kept his hand on her head, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell was keeping her alive. "Don't leave," he whispered to Aurora. "Please don't leave. Emily needs to see you again. She needs to know you never gave up on her." The puppies continued nursing, unaware of the drama, concerned only with milk and warmth. The star-marked one had settled against Aurora's neck, his breathing synchronized with hers, as if lending her his small strength. Grace sat back, exhausted, watching the impossible scene: a dog who should be dead, a man who should be beyond redemption, puppies who shouldn't have survived. All held together by a love that had endured 3 years of hell and was still, somehow, stronger than the darkness that had tried to consume them all. The tragedy wasn't Emily's disappearance, Grace realized. It was the 3 years of unnecessary suffering that followed, the pain that could have been avoided if just one person had listened to what Aurora had been trying to say. But even that tragedy was being transformed now, in this moment, into something else, a testament to the power of truth finally spoken, forgiveness finally given, and love that refused to die no matter how much cruelty it faced. Aurora slept, her puppies safe against her, Frank keeping watch, and Grace maintaining her vigil. Outside, the storm began, finally, to show signs of weakening. Dawn was still hours away, but for the first time in 3 years, it felt like it might actually come. The storm had been dying for an hour when Maggie Henderson burst through the clinic door like an avenging angel wrapped in winter coats. She carried a laptop clutched against her chest, her 72-year-old face flushed with exertion and something else, triumph mixed with urgency. "I knew it," she gasped, catching her breath. "Lord help me. I knew it all along, but couldn't prove it until tonight." Frank looked up from where he'd been keeping vigil over Aurora, his eyes red-rimmed but alert. "Maggie, what are you?" "Shut up and listen, Franklin Donovan." She set the laptop on the examination table, her gnarled fingers surprisingly quick on the keyboard. "Been up all night with my grandson's computer. He showed me how to use the Internet Archives before he left for college. I remembered something about a found child in Oklahoma, right around the time Emily disappeared." And the screen flickered to life, showing a newspaper article from the Tulsa World, dated February 20th, 2018. The headline made Grace's heart stop: "Mystery girl found after Texas storm, no memory of past." "Read it," Maggie commanded. Frank stood on shaking legs, approaching the screen like it might disappear. His lips moved as he read aloud. "A young girl, approximately 7 years old, was brought to St. Francis Hospital in Tulsa on February 15th by a Good Samaritan who found her wandering near the Texas-Oklahoma border. The child, suffering from exposure and mild frostbite, has no memory of her name or family. She has a distinctive star-shaped scar on her forehead and has been placed in emergency foster care while authorities attempt to locate her family." "February 15th, Grace whispered. "The day after Emily disappeared." "Keep reading," Maggie said. Frank's voice cracked as he continued. "The child, who doctors are calling Jane for now, has type O negative blood and a severe penicillin allergy that complicated her treatment. She appears to have been well cared for before her ordeal and shows signs of having had regular medical and dental care. Anyone with information about this child's identity is asked to contact Oklahoma Child Protective Services." Grace grabbed the medical bracelet from where it lay beside Aurora. "Type O negative, penicillin allergy. It's all here. Everything matches." "There's more," Maggie said, pulling up another article, this one from 6 months later. "Jane Doe adopted by Tulsa family." She read quickly. The young girl found after February's storm has been officially adopted by Robert and Linda Mitchell of Tulsa. The child, now going by the name Sarah Mitchell, has adjusted well to her new home but still has no memory of her life before the storm. The Mitchells, who lost their own daughter to illness 2 years ago, say Sarah has been a blessing. "We weren't looking to adopt," Linda Mitchell told reporters, "but when we met her at the hospital where I work as a nurse, we knew she belonged with us." Frank made a sound like a wounded animal. "They adopted her. My Emily. Someone else adopted my baby. They saved her," Grace said gently. "They gave her a home when everyone thought she was dead." Maggie pulled up a third article, this one from just last month. "Look at this. From a human interest piece about storm survivors." She enlarged a photo on the screen. And there she was, Emily, now 10 years old, wearing a school uniform, smiling at the camera. The star-shaped scar on her forehead was visible but faded, looking more like a unique birthmark than an injury. "My God," Frank breathed. "She's beautiful. She looks happy." "Now watch this," Maggie said, pulling up a video from a local news station. They interviewed the family about their experience with adoption. The video played, and Emily's voice, older but unmistakably hers, filled the clinic. "I don't remember much from before, but sometimes I dream about a dog. A big dog who kept me warm. My mom Linda says it's probably just my imagination, but it feels so real." Aurora's eyes snapped open at the sound of Emily's voice. Despite her weakness, she tried to sit up, her whole body quivering with recognition. A whine escaped her throat, high and desperate. "She remembers," Grace said, tears streaming down her face. "Aurora, she remembers you." Frank was already pulling out his phone. "We have to call them. Now, we have to." "Frank," Grace said carefully, "it's 4 in the morning, and we need to think about this. Emily Sarah has a family now. She's been with them for 3 years. This is going to be complicated. I don't care about complicated. She's my daughter. And she's their daughter too now," Maggie said firmly. "The law, the heart, none of it's simple. But first things first, we need proof this is really Emily." Grace held up the backpack. "DNA. We have her hairbrush, her belongings. We can prove it definitively." She looked at the medical bracelet. "And this registration number, it'll have her DNA profile in the system from when she was born." Aurora made another sound, drawing their attention. She was looking at her puppies, particularly at the star-marked one, who was awake and trying to climb over his siblings. Aurora nudged him gently toward Frank, the message clear. "Hope," Frank said suddenly. "That's what we'll call him. Hope." Grace spent the next hour making calls, waking up people who knew people, pulling strings she didn't know she had. By 5:30 a.m., she had a contact at Oklahoma CPS who promised to look into it immediately. By 6:00, that contact had called back with a stunned confirmation the DNA markers from Emily's medical bracelet registration matched their Jane Doe case from 2018. "The Mitchells need to be informed immediately," the social worker said. "This is unprecedented. We'll need to handle this very carefully." By 7 a.m., as weak sunlight finally broke through the dissipating storm clouds, Grace's laptop rang with an incoming video call. With shaking fingers, she accepted it. Linda Mitchell appeared on the screen, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes that were currently wide with shock. "Is it true?" she asked without preamble. "Is Sarah really Emily?" "We believe so," Grace said. "We have her dog, the dog that tried to save her. Can we see her? Sarah's been awake all night. Somehow she knew something was happening. She keeps saying she needs to see the dog." Grace turned the laptop toward Aurora, who was lying still but alert, her puppies nested against her. Then the screen shifted, and there was Emily Sarah, older, taller, but unmistakably the little girl from the videos. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Emily's voice, trembling with emotion and emerging memory. whispered. Aurora. The effect on Aurora was instantaneous and profound. Her tail, which hadn't properly wagged in 3 years, began moving, her eyes, which had held nothing but duty and pain, filled with something that could only be called joy. She tried to bark but only managed a soft woof. Aurora. Emily was crying now, pressing her hands against the screen. It's you, I remember everything, the storm, you keeping me warm in that hollow tree, you going to get help? I tried to follow you but got lost. A man found me, put me in his truck. I hit my head when he braked suddenly. Then nothing until the hospital. Emily. Frank stepped into view, his voice breaking. Emily, it's Daddy. The girl on the screen froze. Recognition dawned slowly, like sunrise after the longest night. Daddy. But they said I didn't have anyone. I never stopped looking. Frank lied and told the truth simultaneously. Aurora never stopped looking. She's been carrying your backpack for 3 years. Baby. She never gave up. Robert Mitchell appeared on screen then, his arm around Emily protectively. Mr. Donovan. You need to understand Sarah. Emily. She's our daughter too now. Legally, emotionally. This isn't going to be simple. I know, Frank said, and Grace heard 3 years of AA meetings he hadn't attended in those 2 words. I know what I lost, what I threw away. I'm not asking to take her back. I'm asking for a chance to know her again, to let her know Aurora, to maybe be a family that's bigger than it was before. Linda Mitchell was crying now too. The dog kept your backpack for 3 years. Grace turned the laptop so they could see the pink backpack, worn and faded but intact, lying beside Aurora. Emily gasped. My backpack with my treasures. Aurora, you kept it safe, just like I asked. Aurora's response was to nudge the star-marked puppy forward again, as if showing Emily that life had continued, that hope had been born from tragedy. She had puppies. Emily asked, wonder replacing tears. Can I? When can I see them? When can I see her? The roads won't be clear for days, Robert Mitchell said, but his resistance was crumbling. But as soon as they are, we'll come to you, Linda added, looking at her husband. She needs this. We all need this. Aurora had been listening to Emily's voice with an intensity that seemed to be pulling her back from the edge of exhaustion. Her breathing, which had been so labored, steadied. Her eyes, which had been clouded with pain, cleared. It was as if hearing Emily, knowing she was alive and safe, had given Aurora permission to heal. There's something else, Grace said. She held up the note from Tr. Thomas Rodriguez. He saved her. He took her to safety knowing it would mean prison if he was caught. Frank, do you know how to reach him? Frank shook his head. He disappeared, but his sister might still be in Tulsa. He looked at the Mitchells on the screen. Rodriguez worked for me. He was a good man who'd made bad choices, but that night, he made the right choice. We'll find him, Robert Mitchell said firmly. He saved our daughter. We owe him everything. Emily was still focused on Aurora. Can you tell her something for me? Can you tell her she's the best dog in the whole world, that I never forgot her? That I love her more than all the stars? Grace held the laptop close to Aurora. The dog's tail wagged harder, and she licked the screen, leaving a smudge over Emily's digital face. Emily laughed, a sound that seemed to fill the clinic with light. I'm coming, Aurora, Emily promised. As soon as the roads are clear, I'm coming, and you can meet my new parents, and I can meet your puppies, and we can all be together. A big, weird, perfect family. Aurora settled back then, truly peaceful for the first time since Grace had found her. The pink backpack lay forgotten, its purpose finally served. The truth had been revealed, the promise kept, the circle closed. And somewhere between Texas and Oklahoma, between tragedy and redemption, a new kind of family was being born. 2 weeks had passed since the video call, and the roads were finally clear. Grace stood at the clinic window, watching the Oklahoma license plate pull into the parking lot. Before the car fully stopped, Emily burst from the back seat, her feet barely touching ground as she ran toward the entrance. Aurora knew. Even before the door opened, she was on her feet, tail creating a windstorm, 7 puppies tumbling in confusion at their mother's sudden energy. When Emily crashed through the door calling, "Aurora, I'm here," the reunion was explosive. Aurora's whole body vibrated with joy as Emily dropped to her knees, arms wrapping around the dog's neck, both of them crying in their own ways. "You kept me warm," Emily sobbed into Aurora's fur, memories flooding back completely now. "In that hollow tree, you covered me with your body. You left to get help, and I got scared and wandered away. The man in the truck found me walking." She pulled back, looking into Aurora's amber eyes. "You never gave up looking for me, did you?" Robert and Linda Mitchell entered quietly, watching their adopted daughter reconnect with her past. Frank stood in the corner, 3 weeks sober, hands trembling not from withdrawal, but from seeing his daughter whole and happy. "We need to talk," Robert said carefully, "about how this works going forward." The conversation that followed was remarkable for its lack of conflict. Emily, wise beyond her 10 years, looked between her 2 sets of parents. "Can't I have all of you? Do I have to choose?" Grace, who'd been holding 2 of Aurora's puppies, offered the solution that changed everything. "Family isn't about subtraction. It's about addition. Emily needs all of you, and you all need her." And the joint custody arrangement was unconventional but perfect. Emily would spend school years with the Mitchells in Oklahoma, summers and holidays split between them and Frank in Texas. Frank committed to rehabilitation, not just for Emily, but for himself. Grace officially adopted 2 puppies, Hope, the star-marked male, and Faith, the smallest female. The Mitchells took another, naming her Miracle. That day, Aurora did something unprecedented. She walked to where the pink backpack lay, picked it up gently, and placed it on a shelf. Then she walked away without looking back, choosing to follow Emily into the present, rather than guard the past. 1 year later, Emily's 11th birthday brought everyone together at Grace's clinic. Aurora watched contentedly as her grown puppies played with Emily, Hope never straying far from the girl's side. Frank, 1 year sober, helped Grace serve cake. The Mitchells and Maggie shared stories. The pink backpack sat peacefully on its shelf, now holding a new item, a photograph of the complete, unconventional family it had helped create. Some bags carry possessions, others carry promises. Aurora's carried both and brought a family home. This story reminds us that family extends far beyond blood relations. It includes those who choose to love us when the world turns away. Aurora's unwavering loyalty, despite 3 years of abuse for a crime she tried to prevent, speaks to the purest form of love, one that endures without expectation of reward. The Mitchells, who embraced Emily as their own, Frank, who found redemption in truth, and Grace, who listened when no one else would, they all became family through choice, rather than chance. But perhaps the deepest lesson lies in what we refuse to see when pain clouds our judgment. Aurora tried desperately to lead rescuers to Emily, but her truth was dismissed as trauma, her desperate attempts interpreted as confusion. How many voices do we silence because they don't align with our assumptions? How many Auroras are bearing scars for truths no one will hear? Gratitude isn't just for second chances, it's for those who never stop believing we deserve them. Aurora never stopped believing Emily would return. Emily's adoptive parents never stopped believing she deserved love. And sometimes, the greatest gift we can give is simply listening to what someone is desperately trying to tell us. Have you ever been blamed or punished for something when you were actually trying to help, like Aurora was? What truth did no one believe until it was almost too late?